your home. And there's a picture on the screen right now you can see of a home that has very good defensible space. Most of the fuel's removed, the grass has all been cut down. And those are the kind of homes and properties that as firefighters, gives us the best opportunity to try to get in there and save that property, or to make sure that people can get out of their property safely by having your property maintained, your driveways cut back, flashy fuels and stuff, so you don't get trapped trying to be there. So you have the defensible space. Then it's also about helping your home survive. And by doing, and then by doing that, you can give your home, even if you're not there, a better chance to survive by hardening your home, making it less susceptible to the ember casting, direct fire impingement, etc., that goes on during these wildfires. So the defensible space is about a buffer you create around your property by removing dead plants, grass, and weeds. And so this buffer helps keep the spread of the fire away from your home. It doesn't have the fuels to continue right up to your home. There's actually another zone now that that they're looking at, which is about 5 feet perimeter around your home to make sure every single piece of flammable vegetation, anything that can burn, is not up against your home. Everything from bark to even if it's weed-eaten grass, any plants that could become combustible during the fire, they want 5 feet of nothing touching your home that could catch on fire. Then the reduction in zone 1 of 30 feet, and then going out to 100 feet. Again, this is the recommendations that we are going with to best help defend your property in the fire service. So using the construction that basically, ember casting is a major cause of wildfires burning down homes. The embers are going, it seems like, farther and farther, up to miles away. Large pieces of debris have been known to get in the convective column and fly out ahead of the fire with a big wind on it, or even just the wind created from the fires and starting new fires in front of us. But those embers, especially with wind, will be blown into and find the weak spots of your home and get in things like tile roofs, can get, and excuse me, I don't mean all tile roofs, early constructed tile roofs that have what's called skip sheeting, where it's not a solid underlay underneath your tiles. It can blow right into your attic, but it will find those spots to try to get in. So roofing is going to be a very important part of it. Covering your vents, making sure you have no openings getting into your vents. They should all be covered by screens. They should be 1/16 of an inch or less to keep those embers out. Again, none of this is perfect, but this is all about reducing your chances of those embers getting in, because where there's a will, there's a way. And this doesn't make it completely fireproof by any means. It just increases the likelihood of these properties, homes, businesses surviving during a wildfire. Same thing with your eaves. Get up underneath your eaves and cover your eaves and make sure you have no openings there. Dual pane windows are a big one. Single pane windows are very prone to heat transfer during these fires. They crack very easily, and then you have instant flame impingement directly into your home as the fire front is coming. So it takes a combination of both defensible space and then the hardening of your home to give it the best chance of surviving a wildfire. And remember, when we're counting on this, when we need this to really work is when we need you to be gone. We need you to be evacuated from the area, trying to get the fire resources in there to protect property once we know we've taken care of all the lives and the risk of the lives are out of the area. So the quicker we know we have lives out of there, the more we can do to help protect your home. So what is SET? SET is about preparing you and your home for the possibility of having to evacuate. So this means you go through a checklist of items that you will need to take when you're evacuating, and you do this ahead of time. You have this stuff available ahead of time so that you're not starting to try to figure out what you need. You have this list developed, and these are all available through the Ready, Set, Go program. The links are on our website. I think Pacifica PD as well has it in the city. So are you ready to implement your family disaster plan? So Evacuation plans. What is your plan for evacuation? You know, one of the things that we hit really hard in North County Fire is the children, and we do evacuation plans for structure fires and all that. And now we're doing more and more, and you'll see it, especially as COVID ends, in the schools, where we want our children in these schools to be educated on evacuation, not just for if your house catches on fire, but if there's a wildfire, you need to leave, because the children are really some of the best kids, what they bring home from school to the parents to help educate everyone about the needs. And that'll be a big focus. Having your disaster kit supply of what that needs, what you need to do. Some of these communities impacted by wildfire, you know, they don't have the necessary supplies the first 24 hours to get everyone, you know, food, water, etc. So what is in your disaster kit to help you until you know, the evacuation centers are set up and you're taken to somewhere safe. Have a communication plan. Know what your plan is if you get separated. How are you going to be able to contact each other? Where are you going to meet if you evacuate? Those are some of the, you know, important things. So go is probably the most important thing we want everyone to do. We want everyone to be able to leave, and we want you to get out early. And that's where we are focusing on in the state, in this department, in our cities, is we, as running incident commanders, running the fires, working with law enforcement, to say it's time to go in these areas, and our law enforcement partners go out and they start the evacuation. So we give the recommendations, and law enforcement starts to implement their evacuation plan, which you'll hear a little bit more about moving on. But get out early. The fires are moving very fast these days, very aggressively. We're, you know, years of drought, so we want to get everyone out as fast as we can, and that has to be before the fire gets there. Once the fire gets there, then we've got a whole different situation. So by getting out early, you give your family the best chance of surviving, and you also get out of the way so all the emergency responders going up there to try to take care of needs up there, of fighting the fire, of defending property, can get up in the roadways. Our roadways on these fires can get so clogged up, you know, people will, that wait too long, you know, actually try to abandon vehicles at times when they're being overrun by fire, you know, and try to flee the area. They waited too long. We saw some of that in the last couple of years on our large fire, and sometimes it ends in tragedy. So we want you to get out and get out early. So go early, leave early. Know your evacuation steps or what you're going to do. Talking about, you know, what to do if trapped. How do you survive? What is your backup plan? So you have a plan that we need to get out, but if for some reason we get cut out, where's our next best place to go on our property, in our neighborhood, where we will be safe from the fire? We have some different language that's used out there: temporary refuge area, temporary safety zones. We don't want you to have to use those, but if you're trapped, you need to go to an area where the fuels are reduced and your probability of survival is good. A lot of times law enforcement will be in there, the firefighters will be in there to help with an alternate plan. So basically, talking a little bit about, you know, why Ready, Set, Go. It's basically, we want to get the consistent message out to everyone. That is our motto. That is what we practice, what we preach, and it's what we do throughout the state, and it's what we're doing in Pacifica, our neighboring surrounding cities, and in North County Fire. So we want everyone to be educated on this, to get the materials that are out there. There's actually very, very detailed information when you click on the site for Ready, Set, Go. And it talks, there's a whole breakdown book on Ready, a whole breakdown book on Set and Go that really gives you some opportunities to be prepared. Again, we use it. It is standard, becoming standard throughout the country, and is very, very common and pretty much the standard in state and federal fires within California. It's endorsed through the International Association of Fire Chiefs, and unfortunately, it took a tragedy like what occurred in Australia in 2009, you know, to get us where we are today. And unfortunately, in the last several years, especially even in the state, we just had too many lives lost trying to get out of harm's way during these wildfires. So some of the information that you can go here to get get additional information on these websites. And again, I believe that this is being recorded, and we'll go ahead and post it for you to be able to come back and go to some of these links to get information about Ready, Set, Go. You can Google Ready, Set, Go through the state of California, through police department, fire department. That's information will be there. So in addition to Ready, Set, Go, what are we doing in Pacifica currently to help with wildfire preparedness? You know, we're pretty fortunate here in Pacifica. We have a lot of coastal influence. We have a lot of high humidities, as we saw last week when it got extremely hot in the Sacramento Valley, the Central Valley. We had a good fog blanket that come in, but it definitely is a little bit, it's more moist. The humidities are up a lot more, but we still have times where things are dry, where that threat in California for any fire, small, whatever it exists. And so what additional stuff are we doing working with public safety, with the City of Pacifica, with our partners out there to help better prepare the town? So the Zone Haven Emergency Evacuation, Captain Clements will speak about that. And we've adopted that here in San Mateo County. It's a great tool, so please pay particular attention to that. We've applied for numerous grant-funded hazardous vegetation and tree reduction implementation to start thinning out fuels. There are a lot of areas that are very dense vegetation, overgrown, and it's hard to recognize the difference between, you know, beauty of the vegetation to the true risk it could pose in the event of some of these wildfires. So we're looking at ways to get grant funding through the state, through the federal government, through the county, to reduce some of this. The community evacuation education campaign, that's all part of the Zone Haven as well. That's tied directly into Know Your Zone campaign. In the Zone Haven, you'll hear about San Mateo County Alert that gives out text pages for I shouldn't say disasters, emergencies or something you need to be notified for, such as evacuations, and that is another additional tool on top of the Zone Haven tool that we have. You can sign up for that to find out about emergencies that may be going on and alert you in your area, and that's for your cell phones. Vegetation reduction grant funding. So we've set several grants, as I said, in for Pacifica. I believe right now we currently have 5 different grants we've applied for, and we have just been awarded our first grant for a community chipping program that will hopefully be starting up in the next 30 to 60 days to allow property owners to sign up and participate in reducing their vegetation on their property, their flammable vegetation, even ornamentals that could be flammable, and getting them out to a street where a funded chipper and crew will show up and chip all your brush and material and take it away. So that's our great first grant that we got, and I take that back. It's actually our second grant. Pacifica actually received a grant through San Mateo Fire Safe last year for an area in Pacifica to start a fuel reduction program there. Not a chipping program, but that was the first grant. Second grant we got is a chipping grant, and we have 4 other grants that we've applied for in addition to this, and we'll hopefully find out if we're awarded those grants by July, with funding not to take place till November. But again, this is a long-term problem. Public outreach and education grant funding. We're doing different things through an organization called Blue Flamingos, and they're going to help us out with a lot of our information sharing, public education, some of the stuff, some of the handouts. And so that's another program that we have that we hope to continue long-term grant funding as well. So the chipping pilot program is a 1-day chipping program we're doing through San Mateo, Fire Safe San Mateo County. And it's a 1-day chipping program of about 150 homes that we've identified, and information will be coming out on that in the next couple of weeks for the folks in the Valimar area to start the chipping program that I was referring to earlier. That would be a much longer program based on the funding. Again, best practices to clear your property. It may not be mandated or required in Pacifica that you clear all this stuff, but it is absolutely recommended and best practice to keep your property clean and clear. You never know where you're going to be when a fire breaks, and having your home prepared is always the best thing to do. Again, talking about the wildfire planning and preparedness, and then we have an additional website there. And I think with that, I will go ahead and end my part of it, and I will open it up to any questions that may be out there.
Thank you, Chief. I have a few questions that were submitted in the chat. One of them was specific to the type of vegetation that you can have within 5 feet of your home. One of our attendees asked if succulent vegetation is okay within 5 feet of the home. Do you know the answer to that, Chief?
Yes, it is. Yes, that is. You know, you have your like your what is it called? Your ice ivy and some of those plants that are truly not flammable. I mean, anything can burn under the right heat, but those are not going to be plants that your ice plant and stuff like that that are going to catch on fire and burn your home. What it's really about is, for sure, it's all the dead and down. It's the leaf litter. It's the eucalyptus leaves. We want that completely down to dirt. Rock landscaping's best over bark, having bark up against your home. Many homes burn. Again, you're talking about some of these fires have winds of 70, 80 miles an hour, and you know, bark, wood chips, those kind of things. We just don't want that up against your home. But if you have non-flammable vegetation or fire-resistant vegetation, you know, that's okay. But we just don't want to see anything else.
Thank you, Chief. One of the other questions had to do with grant funding available for tree removal. You spoke a little bit about the grants. Is there anywhere that some of our community members could go if they had some more questions about grants?
You know, you can always contact, as far as, I guess what you're asking about grants is areas of concern that they would like us to look at, et cetera. Is that what you're referring to?
The question was not that specific, Chief.
Okay, so I would say that we work very closely with Public Works and on, you know, areas within the community where they have concerns, especially with the trees. So it is really a joint collaborated effort on identifying areas of concern. And I would say that if you really, if there's things you're concerned about and you want us to look at as we continue years down the road on these projects from this year moving forward, don't hesitate to call our office and talk to our safety inspectors about areas of concern you have for, you know, fire, I guess I would say, vegetation that's very conducive to fire spread. Again, there's a lot of money involved. There's a lot of time involved. And so you can't just flip a switch and say suddenly Pacifica, Brisbane, San Francisco, wherever is all done. But I think that to continue to cooperatively raise those questions, you know, come to the fire department, and we can definitely take notes and look at areas as we continue to work on the 1-year plan, the 3-year plan, the 5-year plan, as we continue to get funding. You know, this year we gave out, I say we, the state gave $800 million towards fuel reduction, fire safety, wildfire preparedness in this state. And that's some of the money we're trying to grab at. Those numbers used to be 10 million, 20 million for the whole state. But after the last couple of years, there is much more money available, and we are absolutely trying to take advantage of that. But we are also competing with just about every city in the state.
Thank you, Chief. So if folks are looking for more information, they can contact the Department of Public Works, or they can contact the North County Fire Authority.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you, Chief. I think that's the questions that I see specifically for you. And if we don't have any further fire or home hardening questions specifically, I see a lot of questions about vegetation in the chat. Chief, again, we'll just refer those folks to reach out to the fire department or to Public Works with specific locations of concern. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, if they really have, you know, concerns about the flammability in their neighborhood and weeds or problems like that, please contact us. you call our office off our website and speak to one of our safety inspectors regarding some vegetation concerns you may have. I think that'd probably be the best way to do it, and we would work closely again, especially if it's on any land that's not privately owned. It could be city owned with Public Works, but we are definitely looking at all avenues right now to help reduce those risks in our town.
Thank you, Chief. And at the end of this evening's presentation, we'll have contact information up on the screen for everybody to take down. And of course, that information is always available on the City of Pacifica website as well.
Great. And I just want to thank everyone that is on this this presentation for, thanking you for taking the time and the interest, because, it's really about everyone. And the more you get educated, the more you know, the more you're prepared, the better chances you will have of being able to safely get out of harm's way. And again, it's not just here in Pacifica. This information that you learned tonight, you can take with you anywhere you travel in the state. When you go on to visit family, to go on vacation, you never know where you're going to be, where, a wildfire specifically can pop up and cause problems. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. And with that, we're going to invite Mr. Peter Meza from the California Department of Insurance. You folks will just bear with us for a few moments while I get his slideshow up and running.
So good to be here. I can't turn on my video because it says the host has stopped it. So, but at least you can see my logo. So, I'm here. We appreciate the invitation. I don't know if you're going to be able to turn on my camera. That's great. Okay. Sounds good. So my name is Peter Mays. I'm with the Associate Insurance Compliance Officer with the Department of Insurance. I've been in the industry for 31 years. So I was a claims adjuster for 10 years at AAA, and then had the honor of working as an insurance agent and a broker with farmers for about 3 years. And then I've been with the department now 21 years. So it's been a long, steady career in the insurance industry, and I've seen quite a bit of things during that whole time, including having been in the industry during the Oakland fires and the Loma Prieta earthquake. I got an opportunity as an insurance adjuster to visit some of the homes in the Loma Prieta and Santa Cruz area and so forth. But we're going to talk today about community wildfire preparedness. If you could switch the slide, I'm going to try to stay on time, and I don't want to bore you. I want to make sure I give you all the information that is relevant for today. I'm going to try to turn on my camera one more time, okay? But it's not letting me turn on my camera, so we'll leave it like that. You can go to the next slide, please. I guess I can, no, I can't turn it. Yeah, there you go. Appreciate it. So we are the largest consumer protection agency in the state. You can go click it. Oh, you can click that again. I'm just trying to get all those to drop down. Yeah, perfect. We're the largest consumer protection agency in the state. We regulate all lines of insurance, including auto, homeowners, life insurance. We regulate annuities. So there's a lot of things that we regulate, even some of the travel insurance and home warranty policies, auto warranty. So you need to know that the department is regulating this large industry that is $340 billion annually collected in premiums here in the state. So somebody's got to keep an eye on this market, and that's what we do. Our department is the largest insurance market in the United States, also the 4th largest in the world. So we regulate also the insurance companies and the agents, brokers. They have to be licensed to us. Next slide, please. So I want to talk to you. I think this is very important. I think I want to just run through this very, very quickly because I think a lot of people have a misunderstanding about the residential insurance policy. So I'm just going to run through it and mention a few things, and then perhaps this will trigger some information. Every time I present this information, I get all kinds of feedback saying, oh my goodness, I need to review my policy. I didn't understand this part or that portion of it. So I'm going to go through these areas: the dwelling coverage, other structures, personal property, additional living expenses, also known as loss of use, and then liability insurance and the medical payments portion of it. So if we can go to the next slide, we'll start with the dwelling coverage. Let me just go through this. Dwelling coverage, next slide. So essentially the dwelling is, the dwelling coverage is for the permanent structure. The structure, everything that is attached to the home is considered the dwelling part, the permanent structure. And it is important when you are, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more, that you recognize that the dwelling coverage and whatever coverage and the limits you have are really the foundation of where your entire policy is based on. So you're going to see a little bit further what I'm talking about when I say the dwelling coverage, the limits that you have. That's the whole foundation for your entire policy. So let's go to the next slide. So one of the things that you need to understand about selecting limits, and I understand insurance agents they have a duty, a responsibility, fiduciary responsibility to write you the right and the correct limits. And they have the software, and they have what they call errors and omissions coverage. So if they incorrectly do things, yeah, you can go after them, but how is that going to help you if you had a loss and you didn't have enough limits? So I always tell folks, why don't you check, trust but verify, so this is what I tell folks. If you bought the same home in Arkansas, that same home built with the same material and so forth, you can purchase that for $100,000. In Texas, it would cost $300,000. And in California, it would probably cost between $500,000 and $750,000. The exact same home, same square footage, same material. And the reason why there is such a difference and a big disparity in the prices is because you're dealing with California and you're dealing with the property, the land itself. So you've got to remember that you don't get coverage for what your house is worth. You get coverage, your dwelling limits, for what it costs to rebuild the home. So that's what you have to keep in mind. And I had a lot of folks that they didn't realize this. So it's very important that you realize, that you understand that it's about rebuilding the home. Let's go to the next slide. You can press that again. Thank you. Yeah, so what it is you need to be looking for is you need to consider the materials, you need to check the square footage. So I encourage folks to check with a couple construction companies in the area and ask them what they're charging to rebuild. For example, if your home is 1,500 square feet, how much does it cost to rebuild a 1,500 square foot home? How much are you charging per square foot? Somebody will say 300, somebody will say 600. So you need to check with a couple contractors, and that is one way for you to know how much, or if the agent has actually sold you the correct limits on the dwelling coverage. I went back and I checked my policy. I do that occasionally, and I found out that I needed to increase mine. I mean, mine was a little bit too close for comfort, and so I had that increased. So I think that everybody needs to be careful. You need to take some of that responsibility also on yourself. I understand that the insurance company and insurance agents have a duty, but there's nothing wrong with trusting but verifying. So, do that on your time. Check that out. You should look at the declaration sheet, which is a common, the sheet that will actually give you a breakdown exactly what your coverages are, what it's costing, and you could see there, what limits you have. So I encourage you to take a look at that when you get home, or if you're home right now, actually, just when you get an opportunity. After this presentation, go ahead and take a look at that. Next slide. So the other portion besides dwelling is other structure, anything that sets apart the buildings that with a clear space, for example, a detached garage, not one that's actually into the structure, but one that is detached. So that would be for this type of coverage is for other structures. This is sometimes called coverage B. So dwelling coverage is coverage A, other structures is coverage B. And this is also for your swimming pools, fences, and other things like that. So this comes into play, and I'm going to explain to you towards the end. You'll see how other structures does come into play, especially with some of the new bills that have been passed through the Assembly and the Senate. So next slide. Personal property, this is very important. You know, if I could take a home and if I could literally turn it upside down and shake it, pretty much everything that falls out of the home, which is, you know, a dishwasher, a washing machine, they aren't normally attached to the home. A sofa, you know, you have jewelry, computers, TV, clothing, vacuum cleaners, just for personal, that's what's considered personal property. So that would be another portion of it. Now, one of the things that I mentioned earlier was that your the foundation of your policy is based on the dwelling coverage. So you need to understand that many times this is a percentage of your dwelling coverages, and insurance companies have different ratios that they use, 45%, 50, you know, so it's based on whatever you have in dwelling. Then they take your dwelling and then they take a percentage of that, and that is what your personal property limits will be. You can always extend that, or, you know, expand on that if you're in a situation where you feel like, you know, you don't have enough for your personal property. You can talk to your agent about that, and, you know, they can get that, you know, to a different number. Let me go to the next slide. Here it is. Generally, personal property is 50, 75% of dwelling coverage, but every insurer is different. So, you know, it's not the rule, but it does happen between 50, 75. I've even seen less than that. So then you have the actual cash value. There are some policies that are actual cash value. There are some policies that do have replacement costs. Not as common anymore. Actually, there are, I take it back. There are some that still have that. So these are things that you should be aware of. The actual cash value would be something that you would actually replace it. And then if you got a 5-year-old television, then they could take depreciation, and you would, you know, so they would take per year a certain amount or certain percentage. And on replacement costs, it would just be replace the item. You paid $1,000 for it, and it cost, you know, $1,200 to replace it. They would replace it with like, kind, and quality, which is the terms that are used in the policy. So schedule, this is to do with scheduling items, you know, like a ring or something like that. You know, I'm not going to get into all the details about this, but endorsement also, it changes terms of the policy. And then we encourage folks to get a home inventory guide. We have one on our website. We encourage folks, if they can get it, great. But if you can put it up in the cloud, take pictures, you know, put receipts, and make sure you put it in a safe place. I encourage people to send it out to a relative that is not in your state, or put it in a safe deposit box if you actually are able to get this home inventory guide. You know, but it's great to have an inventory of all the items you have, so that when hopefully you'll never need it, but if you do, you have everything there in one place. And believe me, I've experienced folks having a hard time, you know, dealing with their insurance because of not having all the details. And there are new regulations that have been passed, and we're going to talk about those, especially when we're dealing with emergency situations and disaster situations that have been declared by the governor. So I'll talk a little bit about that too, but it's good to have that, you know, avoid a little bit of a headache. So next slide, please. And additional living expenses, also known as loss of use, typically, once again, is 40% of dwelling. This is not the rule. This is just, you know, something that we see. So once again, it's based on the foundation, the dwelling coverage. You got this other coverage, which will cover for laundry, home motel, for lease of a house while your house is being rebuilt, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So these are, important coverages that you should be aware of. Next slide. Liability insurance, a very important part of your coverage. Claims against you, lawsuits that are placed against you. So it's for injuries for non-residents, damage caused by pets, dog bites. Be aware there are some insurance companies that will not, they will exclude if you have a certain breed of dog, and there's some that just won't insure you. They won't take they won't underwrite you if for some reason you have certain dogs. So so you have protection against lawsuits. Let's go to the next slide. Medical payments is an important coverage. Coverage for medical expenses for non-residents. Again, there's no need to prove negligence as opposed to liability, that you have to actually prove that there was negligence for it to start paying out. On this one, there doesn't have to be any negligence or liability on your part. Somebody can slip and fall. You left a water hose out, and hey, it was their fault. Maybe it was your fault. I mean, it was on the sidewalk. Important thing, what you can, especially you have somebody that came from out of town. Say they came to visit you from Europe, and you know what? They don't have medical coverage here. Guess what? They needed to go to the doctor. They needed X-rays, other things. This could cover it for an immediate. Whether you were at fault or not at fault, just gets it covered. Okay, next slide. Perils, and I'm just going to go. It doesn't cover for storms. I'm sorry, it does cover for storms. Doesn't cover for earthquakes. A standard residential policy does not cover for flood. You need to get that through FEMA. Earthquake, you need to get it through the CEA, California Earthquake Authority, or there are some insurers that do sell their own earthquake insurance, which is just a small market. And then, of course, it does cover for fire. So next slide. This is just kind of a list of, I believe the next slide, it has a list of just some of the covered perils. I'll put up for a second here, but it just, I'm not going to go through every one of them. Standard theft, fire, lightning, explosion, smoke, freezing, vehicle, falling objects, and so forth and so on. And then the next slide. Power failure, these are the sort of things that are excluded. Industrial pollution or smoke. Earth movement, it's a big deal. We were seeing houses over in the Laguna Niguel area, Laguna Beach area a while back. There was like 3 or 4 homes that the earth movement caused them to fall. And it was just like, wow, insurance is not going to cover that. So sometimes, you have to make sure you look at these things very carefully. You're purchasing homes. Water damage due to flood, intentional loss, war, nuclear accidents, pets and other animals, insects, and so forth. So these are some of the excluded perils, some of the things that are not covered. Next slide. Let me just talk about these things. I just talked to a group of 29. This was 29 buildings of a homeowners association. And I'm going to take the loss assessment first, this bottom one. And they are being assessed about $1,500 each, $1,500. And they didn't have this loss assessment coverage. If they had it, then what would happen is the homeowner association sometimes, there could be something in excess for the common areas. And so it's important that you consider this if you're in a homeowner association, whether it's just the homes that are within a, like for example, myself, I live in a gated community, but they're homes, they're separate homes. But we're in an association. So I added the home assessment coverage, and it was extremely cheap. I think I got, it was $25,000 loss assessment for, it was just dollars. It was dollars. I think for the year it was $10 or something like that. So I encourage folks to get it. I had a person come up to me in Berkeley, a couple, they said, we had this loss assessment. We got talked into it by our insurance agent, and they had, the whole association had just been assessed, I think it was $12,000 each. And so you can imagine a lot of folks who were on limited income and so forth were really in a straitjacket. And they said because they had this coverage, it was completely covered by the insurance. So I encourage folks to make sure that if you're in some sort of association, please get that. I'm getting a lot of feedback on this all the time. Folks are really, surprised that they didn't know about this. Building code upgrade coverage, very important also. If, the code changes, if you bought your home and it was built 50 years ago or even 20 years ago, there could be some upgrades in the city code for certain things. And so that is not something that's standard and not normally covered in a residential policy. So I encourage folks to make sure that they have that little coverage. It's just an additional thing. It's not much either. It's not very much to add it to your policy. Next slide. Shopping for insurance. Let me go through these quickly. Just if you need to go to the next slide. I want to finish here, make sure I'm not going over time. So just take time to shop around, look around, consider buying auto and residential from the same insurer. Obviously, if you get insurance from the same insurance company, you can get a discount. So know that. Raise your deductible. You have a $500 deductible. It's more common to have a $1,000 deductible. Perhaps you can absorb a $5,000 deductible. So you've got to check with your loan company because they might have certain requirements as to how low or how high they will let you go. So you might want to talk to them. Remember, you can get discounts for security like alarms and deadbolts with some insurance companies. So check with them and find out if that's something you can do. Next slide. We encourage folks to go onto our website. We can do a comparison of the 30 largest insurance companies. It's not a quote, it's not an insurance quote. It just kind of gives you a comparison. So you can do a premium comparison of residential insurance, and it's a guide. I guess it can at least give you an idea of where insurance companies are, and then contact them directly and get the actual detailed quote from them. Next slide. Also, okay, so this is kind of a continuation. That's our website there. Call us also if you would like us to help you access this. Our number 800-927-4357, Monday to Friday, 8 to 5. Every officer that answers there is actually a compliance officer, so they're going to help you and walk you through the process. Next slide. Also, there's a consumer complaint study. I like to call it the report card. It lists the insurance by justified complaints, and it's based on the ratio, based on also exposure. So you're going to see some folks that may have more complaints, but they also have they may have a larger exposure. They may have a lot more, they're underwriting a lot more policies in the state of California, as opposed to maybe one that is smaller and doesn't have as many complaints. So you've got to look at that. It gives you the ratio though, and it also gives the numbers to the insurance company, so you can actually see their 800 numbers. And so we encourage you to go to our website and take a look at that. Next slide. We just encourage you to fill out your application completely, read all the documents thoroughly. Don't sign something that's left blank. You don't understand it. Make sure you read your policy. And then once again, complete that home inventory guide. Next slide. What to do after loss. Next slide. I just want to mention a few things because this is pretty standard in any insurance contract, residential insurance contract. Mitigation. So if you can just press that button one more time, I think it'll drop all the little deals there. There it is. So mitigation, it essentially, it minimizes exposure. Mitigation is to protect your family and your property. Mitigation is your responsibility. And if you look at your insurance policy, your residential insurance policy, the contract, it's very specific, and it says that you have certain duties and responsibilities. And so, you have a leak that happened because there was a storm, and then it's a Friday, and you're like, I'm going to have the insurance come out here anyways, and they're going to come out, and Monday's a holiday, but I'll get to it on Tuesday. You'll get here and you don't really do anything to protect additional damages. You know, those are things that the insurance companies, you know, it's in the contract. So they can be a stickler for that sort of thing. So I encourage you to just, you know, do your due diligence and, you know, cover, you know, whatever, if you see something that happened there and, you know, whatever you can do to minimize additional damages, I encourage you to please take the time to do that, because that is part of the contract that you have with the insurance company. So we encourage you to be careful. Also, strapping on loose objects like your water heater, fire retardant material, and of course, location of where your residence is. That's all part of mitigation. Next slide. Of course, getting homeowners in condominium or renters insurance, these are all ways to reduce your loss. I mean, if you don't have it, we've seen it. I've seen it over and over the years. Believe it or not, folks said, hey, I paid my house off. I didn't have insurance. And guess what? I was caught in the 2003 or the 2007 fire, or the ones that happened even lately. So, you know, you have to make sure you do that. I think the fire department already talked about the brush clearance, defensible spaces, tree trimming. So these are things that you need to consider. Next slide. Yeah. We can go to the next slide. I think the fire department's covered a lot of these. Family evacuation plans, phone emergency numbers, have some sort of plan. Our family, we've already discussed what we're going to do if there's a major disaster, we can't get back to our home. We've already know where we're going to meet. You know, these are things you need to do. And once again, home inventory guide. I can't say it enough. Next slide. Insurability in high fire risk places, what rural landowners should know. If you can go to the next slide, I can talk about this a little bit and then we can wrap her up. So it's governed by law, property rate regulation. Its rates cannot be as excessive or inadequate, can be higher for brush wildfire areas, high protection classes, and etc. Insurers can generally choose where they want to write. Insurers must maintain eligibility guidelines, so it has to be specific and substantially related to loss exposure, and it's sufficiently detailed to determine appropriate rating plan for insured. So for the insured. Next slide. So it's all regulated. We look at these things. We do take a look at the filings that they do when they file them with us and they want rate increases and so forth. So the guidelines can include but are not limited to protection class, proximity to brush and wildfire area, the slope, road access, mapping or evaluation system data, and then of course their exposure. So the big thing about insurers is they you know, they don't put their risk all in one area. That has happened to insurers in the past. So you spread your risk. That's all what insurance does, is spread your risk. And so if insurance companies saturate a certain market, it can become a problem. AAA did that in Northern California during the Oakland fires, and there was a problem. It caused a lot of consternation. I was with the insurance company. We used to talk about it all the time, that we oversaturated a certain area. It happened to another insurance company during the during the earthquakes in Northridge. Company almost went under because they had oversaturated markets. So insurers they have to consider that. Have they, you know, they may be writing it for a while, but all of a sudden they'll say, hey, we're starting to saturate this market. So they may pull back and not write in that area. Next slide. So there have been some updates through the legislative means, and the FAIR Plan has increased limits. They're now to 3 million. Comprehensive coverage installment plans. There's no fees now. It's a statewide standard for fire-resistant structure mitigated property. So a CDI is trying to establish standards that will require insurers to consider home hardening as part of rating and underwriting a residential. So the insurance commissioner is really working with insurers and stakeholders and going through things, trying to figure out how we can establish these standards. So, you know, there is an SB and 190 and AB 38, you know, trying to set some home hardening standards. The insurers are not required to use them for rating and underwriting purposes at this time. So we're hoping that they will do so, but we're trying to establish some standards that will be used. And so we're not at that place quite yet, but we're constantly looking for things. We've had hearings and a lot of things. So next slide. Here's some of the bills that have passed in the last year. SB 824. This was actually our insurance commissioner, Ricardo Lara, had actually been an author of this particular bill when he was in the Senate. Once he became the commissioner, he had the opportunity to be the first insurance commissioner to actually use this. And he put the moratorium on after the governor declared these fires a disaster. He actually put in one back in 2019, and then again used it, the second moratorium in 2020 actually. So it's a good thing. He stops insurance companies from non-renewing policies for 1 year. SB 894 helps uninsured, somebody that's underinsured under residential policy, move that. Remember, we were talking about the dwelling coverage and the B coverage, which is the other structures. If somebody ran out their dwelling coverage, which is the A coverage, they could actually move the other structure, the B coverage, to A. So it's really a creative way to, increase, that coverage for, in an emergency purposes. Insurance Adjusters Act, SB 2040, just kind of strengthened that Insurance Act. We'd have insurance adjusters that would come out from out of state and they didn't understand certain things. And so it really, there's education and there's certain things that are required by insurance companies when they're bringing in these adjusters. So SB 508 ensures to provide residential property bill of rights. It strengthens the requirements by insurance companies to notify specifically mobile homeowners and condominium owners. There wasn't that strength behind it as it was for residential insurance companies. So it's added this where they have to notify them, the insured about these property bill of rights. AB 1816 extends cancellation. This is a really important thing. It used to be 45 days and it's now expanded to 75 days. We don't feel that's enough, but it gives somebody at least a little bit more time. You get a cancellation notice or non-renewal and all of a sudden you're like, what do I do? So it expands that. 2756, it strengthens consumer protections. And so it does reduce the burden on some of the, well, it gives transparency, requires transparency when a new policy is sold and that did not have wildfire. So they have to tell you, they have to be very specific when a policy that doesn't have wildfire coverage, but it has the other coverages. So there's some of these policies that there are multiple policies. Anyway, you can read a little bit more about that. SB 872, residential property. It essentially requires advance payment of no less than 4 months of AELE coverage, which is that additional living expenses. And you no longer have to itemize inventory. Remember, I was talking about the inventory guide. That's when there's a declared disaster of some sort. So it's important when a home is rendered uninhabitable due to a wildfire. So that bill is going to go into effect as of July 1st, 2021. So that's important to know. So I think we go to the last slide. I think it should be the last slide. Yeah. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them now, or know that our website is right there. You can go there and also call our 800 number 927-4357.
So Mr. Meza, thank you very much. I'm looking to see if there's any last minute questions that are being submitted that would be for you. I do see a number of questions in the chat with questions about fuels, trees, things of that nature. I'm going to bring back Deputy Chief Bierman here in just a moment to address some of those questions. If folks will just bear with us, please. So, Mr. Meza, I'm not seeing any questions directed towards you. I do have your contact information, and I will share that again at the conclusion of tonight's presentation. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for allowing us to be here.
And with that, I'd like to invite Deputy Chief Bierman back. Chief, are you there?
I am.
Thank you, Chief. We had a number of questions in the chat asking questions about eucalyptus trees. Are they more hazardous to fire than other types of trees? There's some questions about eucalyptus groves here in Pacifica. Could you talk a little bit about that, Chief?
Sure. So, eucalyptus is a very oily plant species. It's been a nuisance, identified as a nuisance plant tree here in San Mateo County for quite a while. And 2 years ago, I had a meeting where they actually identified eucalyptus as now an invasive species. And they would like nothing more to remove them. From a fire standpoint, they burn very hot. They're very oily when they burn. That's why we don't recommend you burn eucalyptus as firewood in your fireplace. Has a lot of creosote, etc. But some of the worst parts about the eucalyptus are all the leaf litter and everything that accumulates underneath all these trees, and those are very receptive in the event of a wildfire. And then you have these a lot of times low-hanging branches and stuff that can the ground starts on fire. It's a ladder fuel. It runs right up, and eucalyptus groves can definitely ignite pretty easily under the right circumstances. Again, we don't have a lot of those circumstances routinely in Pacifica because of the humidities and stuff, but we're definitely starting to see a trend towards being drier the last couple years in this weather system. So eucalyptus trees are also very, very expensive to cut down. Large eucalyptus trees almost always take a crane. I've heard of stories from $10,000 to $20,000 a tree to take down. And then when you take them down, it's important that, especially for a property owner, that removes them, you've got to treat them with chemicals. Otherwise, they just grow right back. Eucalyptus trees can very easily grow up to 12 feet a year. So they are a fire hazard. They are a concern for property owners. I recommend that if you can thin them and have the ability to remove them financially, that's a good thing to do. I think it's a good fire safety thing as a flammable fuel. If you don't, at a minimum, pick up all the stuff laying in the understory there, all the leaf litter, limb your trees up as high as you can, get them 10 to 15 feet so no branches are closer than that. Again, with our chipping program that we have going, might be a great opportunity to be able to reduce some of those fuels and get them chipped away at no expense to the owners if you can help by trimming them and getting them out to your street when that comes around. I also saw some questions that were on there, Captain Clements, regarding the Highway 1 corridor. I talked to the president of Fire Safe San Mateo County that we are a part of, and they've identified that too along Highway 1. The vegetation, the trees. Highway 1 is all managed and the responsibility of Caltrans. And so we are working with them through the Fire Safe Council to see about lining up a project for some fuels reduction on the Highway 1 corridor, particularly between the town and south to the tunnel, but really all areas, in and out. The problem or a concern obviously is in the event a wildfire does come, once you hit the one, there's only two ways to go, left or right. And so that is on the radar, and we will continue to push those issues to see if we can get something done. Oops.
Chief, thank you much for that. I think you responded to the questions that we have there in the chat.
Okay.
And with that, once again, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Chris Clements. I'm a captain with the Pacifica Police Department. One of my duties here at the police department is an emergency management here for the city. And this evening, you've heard from Deputy Chief Bierman talking about Ready, Set, Go. You heard from Mr. Meza talking about having appropriate amounts of insurance and homeowners insurance to protect your property, your things. I'm going to talk to you a little bit tonight about evacuation and the new Zone Haven platform that the county has adopted to facilitate that. going to talk about alert notification systems, specifically our own SMC alert system here in San Mateo County. Some of you on this call might be familiar with SMC alert. And I'll be talking about personal preparedness, which is definitely part of everybody's emergency preparedness kit. Should be learning some skills and having a plan and putting together supplies. And I'll talk about ways that the Pacifica CERT program, Community Emergency Response Team, facilitates that here in Pacifica. So talking, first and foremost, we'll talk about evacuations. So evacuations could be necessary in the event of a variety of hazards. We're talking mostly about wildfire this evening, but it could also be ordered in the case of a tsunami warning or a flood or any other kind of disaster or event, such as a hazardous materials event or something of that nature. When ordering or facilitating evacuations, fire and law work together through what's called unified command in order to determine an area to be evacuated and to determine the best routes to safely evacuate folks. And in the case of fire in particular, as you can imagine, evacuation routes are dictated in part by the location of the fire, topography, the weather conditions, fire behavior, that sort of thing. So typically evacuation areas are created in the field by personnel at the front lines. They use maps and they put together an area to be evacuated, and then they relay that information. So it goes to our public safety dispatch centers, who then disseminate that information into the community through a number of means. Reverse 911, which means you would receive a telephone call to your home alerting you to the need to evacuate. Information will be shared on social media platforms, such as Nextdoor, Facebook, Twitter, also through mainstream media platforms, such as television and radio. There's also wireless emergency notification systems, such as the alerts that we receive on our cell phones. So a little bit of history about the Zone Haven platform we're talking about tonight. 2018, our County Fire Chiefs Association agreed to develop a countywide evacuation plan. In 2019, our Board of Supervisors in San Mateo County approved the funding source for that through Measure A. In 2020, Zone Haven was used for the first time in response to the CZU complex fire in the Santa Cruz Mountains in the border of San Mateo County, and subsequently launched the countywide Zone Haven platform. So what makes Zone Haven such a valuable tool in evacuation management? So Zone Haven uses pre-designated zones. These zones were created by your fire departments and law enforcement agencies throughout the county, taking into account the topography, roadways, number of critical facilities, and avenues that can be used for escape. This platform allows these pre-designated zones to be shared by all agencies in San Mateo County. It's an online platform, so the information is real time. The information could be more quickly distributed to the community through the web-based platform. And it also allows for real-time updates. For example, if an evacuation warning is issued to alert community members that an evacuation is forthcoming, that we believe an evacuation is imminent, we can push that information out much quicker using the Zone Haven platform than we would in the past. This is an example of what the zones look like. So countywide, there's more than 300 distinct zones. The zones are identified by a series of letters that indicate the jurisdiction, and then they are numbered numerically. You can see that Pacifica is divided into 19 zones. So following the CZU complex in August of last year, the Know Your Zone campaign was launched throughout San Mateo County to help community members identify the zone where they reside And in the event that first responders believe that evacuation was imminent, they could share that information in the community, identifying the zones to be evacuated by their zone number. In order to learn or to find out the zone that you reside in, you simply go to the website and punch in your street address, and it will show you where your zone is located. City of Pacifica is divided into 19 zones. We ask residents to identify their zone number and look at the details, so they would be able to more quickly identify their best path to safety. Now, in the event of an evacuation, the evacuation routes are going to be the same roadways that you use to go to and from your home on a regular basis. And the route that would be best used in the event of a wildfire would in part be dictated by the location of the fire, the travel of the fire, things of that nature. But everybody should know more than one way to get to and from their home. So when logging into the Know Your Zone website, it's going to bring you to this dashboard here and invite you to find out where your zone is. It'll bring you to a screen that tells you some of the status levels that will be shown on the Zone Haven platform. If you look here to the right side of the screen under evacuation status levels, you can see red indicates that an evacuation order has been issued. Yellow would be an evacuation warning, kind of like the traffic signals. Yellow means get ready. And then blue would be an advisory if there's an advisory message that's been posted for your zone. You can also see down there green. Green means it's clear to repopulate, and a purple indicator would indicate a shelter in place. For example, if there was a hazardous situation, a hazmat situation nearby, where it would be safer to actually shelter in place instead of to evacuate. So on the website, they're going to ask you to follow the link to find your zone, and then they're going to offer you this this useful image that you can use to record your zone number and post it in a conspicuous place in your home, such as on the refrigerator or maybe a bulletin board or near the telephone. So one of the advantages of having pre-designated zones and encouraging community members to know the zone in which they reside, or perhaps the zone where your loved ones reside, or where your children's school is located, or your place of business is located, is that when first responders push out information alerting you to possible evacuations, they can easily refer to it by a zone number. This tremendously helps with the messaging. It helps to ensure that the fire and police personnel on the ground are talking the same language, or talking about the same area that needs to be evacuated. So this is much more effective and efficient and helps us get the messaging out quicker. This is an example of pushing out the evacuation information through a variety of sources. This is a message that was posted to Twitter during the CZU complex. You can see the zones here that are impacted. This was a message that was placed on Twitter that this person took and retweeted to broaden the area that of coverage for this messaging. So the Zone Haven platform also allows you to register for San Mateo alerts. I'll talk a little bit about that further. You can see that the community of Atascadero is also on here. They're also a customer of Zone Haven. And you can see that step 3 also encourages you to start preparing now. They talk about things like having a plan, identifying a meeting place, and there's a couple of useful links on there that'll take you to the FEMA site and to the CAL FIRE site. This would be the SMC alert dashboard that you would land on when you follow that link, and I'll talk a little bit more about SMC alert in just a few minutes. So when you go to find your zone, on on the previous screen, it's going to bring you here. It allows you to enter a street address. And then it's going to illuminate that grid, or that zone, excuse me, on the map. And this screenshot here shows you a legend with the zone statuses displayed, and you can see from the map that none of these zones are under any kind of special status. None of them are on evacuation warning. None of them are on evacuation order or advisory. It's all clear. Now, after entering my street address here, 400 Rockaway Beach Avenue, it drops a pin on the map, and then it opens a window that gives you a description of the zone itself. You can also see some of the main thoroughfares are also visible on the map. And as you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, while this is a screenshot, the platform does allow you to zoom in and out of the map, and it does allow you to go back and forth from a satellite view or a map view. This is a close-up of what the window looks like. So you can see at the top of the zone, it tells you what the zone name is. It tells you the status right there. Clearly, it's normal status. It's not any of the colors we talked about. It gives you a brief description of the location. In this case, it's Rockaway Beach, and it gives you a brief summary of this location. So once again, just to reiterate, you would go to step 1, find your zone, print up the placard. So knowing your zone is just one part of an evacuation preparedness plan. I encourage you to also visit the North County Fire Authority's website and their Ready, Set, Go page. And I'm trying to see if I have any questions that have been submitted specific to evacuation zones. And while I don't see any questions, for anybody that is watching this evening that has a smartphone handy, if you want to scan that QR code on your screen, it will take you directly to the My Zone Zone Haven website as we speak. So I'm going to leave that up there for another minute or so, if anybody wants to go find out what their zone is during this class today. So, but quick, before I move on to alert notification systems, I see a couple of questions in here about folks that need assistance, extra assistance evacuating. One of the things that Chief Bierman talked about during his presentation was knowing what the hazards are, knowing if the area you reside in may be subject to evacuation, and going as soon as possible, and helping other people if they need assistance with evacuating. And so I would highly encourage anybody in attendance tonight that if you know of somebody who lives in an area who may need assistance with evacuation, it would be helpful if you were also familiar with their zone and are attentive to any kind of potential fire threats or other hazards that may call for them to evacuate, and have a plan in place to assist them with evacuating as well. Yeah, moving on to alert notification systems. We'll talk a little bit about the SMC Alert. SMC Alert is a notification system that can be used to immediately contact those that are registered for the service in urgent or emergency situations. And you would receive an alert to your email accounts, cell phones, smartphones, tablets, or even a voice message to a landline phone. This is all configurable in the SMC Alert platform. There's no charge to register for SMC Alert. You can register multiple devices for a single user. You can also register multiple locations. For example, if you wanted to register your home, you'd also like to register your office, and you'd also like to register your children's school, or the home of another loved one within San Mateo County, you can register to receive alerts for all of those locations. SMC Alert is messaging that is provided through the San Mateo County Office of Emergency Services. All of the jurisdictions in San Mateo County, all of the cities and special districts have access to this system, which means that you could receive an SMC alert from the San Mateo County, alerting you to a wide scale hazard that would impact the entire county, or you may receive an alert from the city of Pacifica alerting you to a situation that is only impacting the city of Pacifica. The information could include directions or instructions, and there may be multiple messages, so you would want to keep your device nearby, smartphone, or if you're receiving the messages through email, you'd want to stay engaged for any updates. And once again, the information is distributed throughout San Mateo County. Jurisdictions have the ability to send alerts locally, and they can also send alerts to countywide or to neighboring jurisdictions. For example, last year when the beaches in Pacifica were closed, there was messaging that went out to the entire county to alert countywide community members that the beaches in Pacifica would be closed. What types of alerts can be sent? Most commonly, these are life safety alerts. Sometimes it has to do with utilities or roadway closures, or their disaster notifications. SMC Alert was used by the city of San Bruno in 2018 during the shooting that happened at the YouTube campus, and then again in 2019 for a shooting that occurred in the shops at Tanforan. The sheriff's office in San Carlos used it to send out information to residents in San Carlos when there was a hazardous material discovered in a home and they wanted people to avoid the area and to shelter in place. And again, SMC Alert was used in 2020 during the CZU fire to notify residents and community members in that area, not only about the evacuation warning and evacuations, but also provide important information about evacuation centers, shelters, and where they could go for assistance. Information such as evacuation routes could also be shared, and notifications to special groups such as our community emergency response team volunteers could go out through SMC Alert. Last year, there was a number of messages that went out from the San Mateo County Emergency Operations Center during the public health emergency with information. We can also use SMC Alert for precautionary warnings. For example, if there's crime alerts or crime trends, I spoke earlier about the shooting at YouTube and Tanforan. We can also use SMC Alert to push out messaging about major road closures. Here in Pacifica, we've done that on several occasions where there's been traffic conditions, whether it be a collision or power outages that impacted traffic flow from south of Pacifica through Pacifica, so that we could alert those that don't live in Pacifica to avoid traveling through a congested roadway. And sometimes jurisdictions push out information about mountain lightings and other wildlife warnings as well. And for additional information on SMC Alert, please visit smcalert.info. And if there are any more questions about SMC Alert or Zone Haven, I'll give folks a few minutes to submit those while I prepare for the next part of tonight's presentation on the Community Emergency Response Team. Okay, this presentation is going to be on personal preparedness in the Pacifica Community Emergency Response Team. So Community Emergency Response Team, or CERT, was originally developed by Los Angeles Fire Department in 1985. They realized that community members would likely be on their own during the early stages of a catastrophic disaster, and decided to create some basic training in disaster survival and rescue skills to assist community members in their ability to survive such a catastrophic disaster, and to help their community members in the event that first responders were unavailable. Following September 11, 2001, Citizen Corps was established and currently falls under the FEMA umbrella within the federal government. CERT is considered a critical program in efforts to engage everyone in our nation to help make their community safer, to be more prepared, and to be more resilient when incidents occur. So the Pacifica CERT mission statement is that we will train individuals in their neighborhoods, businesses, and schools in emergency preparedness and basic preparedness techniques, and enable them to prepare as volunteers to take an active role in providing critical support in a safe manner to emergency service personnel during emergencies and in disasters. The Pacifica CERT basic training program is presented through a collaboration between the Pacifica Police Department and our partners at the North County Fire Authority. We present a CERT basic course twice a year through the Pacifica Police Department. And before the pandemic, we actually presented these classes here at the police department. Our classes typically consist of 20 to 25 members of our community. The course consists of 9 training units, and the final day of instruction is a full exercise where they demonstrate the skills that they've learned during their course. Anybody who graduates from the CERT program is sworn in as a disaster service worker. They're invited to attend ongoing CERT meetings. They're invited to participate in our annual exercise Pacifica exercise to test their skills. And we also participate in countywide exercises and events. So here is a breakdown of the course of instruction. There's a unit on disaster preparedness, fire safety. The disaster medical component is presented over 2 classes. There's a class on light search and rescue, where folks are taught how to safely go into buildings, how to perform cribbing and rescue operations. There's a unit dedicated to the CERT organization. There's a unit that's dedicated to disaster psychology, which is how people respond in a crisis. There's a unit on terrorism, and as mentioned, the final day of training is a full training exercise. The classes, I know there's some CERT members on this meeting, are presented in 2-hour increments over the course of the 9-week period, usually in the evenings, which allow folks to attend around their work and school schedules. So the first part, one of the first benefits of our CERT program is you become familiar with the type of hazards that we face here in Pacifica, whether it's the hazard of tsunamis, winter storms and high surf, eroding bluffs, wildfires, threat of earthquakes, and public safety power shutoffs over the last few years. We learn to be better prepared for those. We have good community-based discussion during our meeting, during these course sessions about measures that some folks have already employed to help prepare themselves and their families, and everybody learns in the group environment. We talk about preparedness. We talk about having a supply on hand in the event of a disaster. We talk about having a plan, not just an evacuation plan as you see on the screen here to evacuate the home and have a pre-designated meeting place, but also meeting place pre-designated in the event there was something more catastrophic, like an earthquake or a tsunami. And we don't just talk about a disaster preparedness kit that you would keep in your household. We also talk about a disaster kit that you might want to have at the office, or you might want to have in your car. The attendees learn skills such as how to extinguish a fire using a fire extinguisher. They receive hands-on instruction on things like CPR, wound treatment, applying splints, things of that nature. During the final exercise, they get to see some of the equipment that we have available for the Community Emergency Response Team. This is the trailer that we use to store supplemental medical supplies that can be used in the event of a catastrophic disaster. These are photos of some of our students on their final day during the final exercise, where they're given a series of simulated incidents where they need to respond. They need to work together as a team. They need to communicate with the command post, and they need to assess and appropriately respond to the scenarios. CERT in your neighborhood that you might not be aware of. We have over 300 active members of our community who have completed our CERT basic course. The city of Pacifica is geographically divided into 5 divisions, and everybody who completes the CERT basic course knows which division they are a part of and where they would respond to in the event of a disaster, or they should know. We also have some branches within CERT for folks with certain skills or expertise. There's a medical branch for CERT members who may have medical training that exceeds the basic training that we give them in the class. You might be surprised how many folks we have that work in the medical field or dental field that are CERT volunteers. We also have a communication branch, which is made up of amateur radio operators, or AROs. We have a number of community members that like animals and are interested in disaster preparedness for pets. If you have a disaster kit at home, you might want to make sure that you have some food in there for your dog or cat or whatever your pet may be. This is an example of some of our CERT volunteers that are engaged in the our CERT annual exercise, which tests their skills. And some of the other activities that our CERT volunteers engage in throughout the community are the presentation of our earthquake preparedness course, which is presented several times over the course of the year. Pre-pandemic, this class was done in person here at the police department. And during the COVID pandemic, we've twice presented this class via Zoom as part of Tsunami Preparedness Week, and also in April to coincide with the anniversary of the 1906 earthquake in San Francisco. Our CERT volunteers also represent Pacifica at the San Mateo County Disaster Preparedness Day event, which is held annually at the San Mateo County Fairgrounds. And they share literature and talk about preparedness information specific to Pacifica. There's typically a county-wide CERT exercise, which brings CERT volunteers from communities throughout San Mateo County to participate collectively in a large-scale disaster. That exercise usually takes place over the course of a full day. And then our CERT volunteers also come out and work the Fog Fest Street Fair, not only promoting our CERT program, but also assisting walking through the event, looking for people that might be in distress, and communicating directly with the police department staff that are on site. And these are some more photos of some of our CERT volunteers participating in exercises, testing their skills in a scenario. If you're interested in more information about our CERT program, we do have a dedicated CERT webpage at the police department webpage. The address is at the top of the page here. And if you would like some more information about when we're going to have our next CERT course, please send us an email to cert@pacificapolice.org. That email address is at the bottom of the page as well. And I'm looking to see if there's maybe any further questions in the chat. specifically to either Zone Haven or SMC Alert or even our CERT program. I'll give folks a couple more minutes here to submit any questions. So I would like to talk a little bit about our brand new wildfire preparedness page. Can be found under the National Disasters homepage at the police department websites. We created this web page to be a one-stop shop for information about wildfire preparedness. We collaborated with our partners from North County Fire Authority. If you visit the web page, you'll find that there's several links to North County Fire and some of their Ready, Set, Go program pages. There's also a link on there to the California Department of Insurance as well. So I invite you to visit that page. And I thank everybody for joining us this evening. What I will do is I will put my email address into the chat. If there was something that we missed, I apologize. I think we shared a lot of valuable information this evening about preparedness and ways that you can better prepare yourselves and your families for the threat of wildfire that we're all seeing statewide. Here's a contact information for the agencies that spoke here tonight. So I want to thank everybody for your time tonight. I'm going to put my email address into the chat. And thank you all and have a good evening.